Okay. So I hope everyone enjoyed that 5 minutes to review. Welcome. So good to see all y'all. Sorry I'm a little late. Um, and for those that are able, thank you for having your camera on. It's nice to connect visually. If you can't do it, you can't do it. Um, who's all translating today? Anastasia, is it you and oh, it's Eka. Thank you. Anybody else? Octavian, are you translating? Cool. Give me a heads up if it's too fast. Mm, okay. Hi. Tin, I love the background there. Is that Diamond Mountain? I recognize that place. Okay. Thanks everybody for being here. Let's begin. Last time, let's review last time. Here's what we did. We talked about me. And I shared some history of me and ACI. And hopefully the point was so we know each other a little bit, but also some of the lineage, um, my story and how I came into the teachings. And that fed into, a little bit of the lineage of ACI. We talked about samsara and nirvana. And the whole point of that is because that's the whole point of Vinaya, which is our study. That's our subject. So, any questions from last week? I'm scared to ask. Opening a can of worms here. I have questions from last week, but no questions. Okay, good. If you do have a question, you can throw it in the chat. See if we get time, but it's a big class today. ACI classes, there's, I don't know, I think they're quite deep. And do what you can do, right? So you aren't supposed to understand every homework question necessarily. You certainly aren't supposed to be able to understand the readings the first time you read them completely. There's a lot of ACI classes I've done, I don't know, 5 times, 6 times. And each time they reveal themselves a little bit more and a little bit more. So I stressed homeworks and quizzes last time because I think that they're cool. I personally like them. I found them helpful, but don't let them stress you out, right? Some people need a kick in the ass, and some people need to chill out and figure out which category you're in. So if you feel stressed out by coursework, not really the idea. You just feel inspired by them, that's awesome. This class is, we're covering the entire scope of Vinaya, beginning to end. And So this class we'll talk about the framework of Vinaya. So it's a highly theoretical class, yet again, in ACI. And so we need to make sure we're taking this course and all ACI courses with keeping in mind the practicality of it. So this course might be harder than others in some ways, like vowed morality of monks and nuns, which is most of Vinaya. It's just not going to be super relevant to everyone. So, but morality should be, right? Like, hopefully we can all relate to the idea of living an ethical life being relevant to our human experience. And to use these 5 weeks to really think about our morality, to investigate it, to clarify it, like to use these 5 weeks to dig deeper into our beliefs about those things. And I don't know, I know some people don't love the word morality. I think it's awesome. If you like the word ethics or core values, just substitute the word that works. It's all the same. It should be, but hopefully we can find inspiration. So, maybe we use these 5 weeks to be like, I'm going to work extra hard on my once every 6 weeks book. I'm really going to like try to work hard on making it a once every week book or once a day book or 6 times a day book. Even if those 6 times are 5 of them are last thing at night. And to, again, not to, use that as an excuse to feel bad about ourselves. There's times when I don't even know where my 6 times book is, let alone having done it 6 times a day. I don't even know where it is. Right now I do. But there's times in my life where, I'm not inspired. But now we have an opportunity to get inspired. And to remember that the idea isn't to check our morality 6 times a day. It's not a 6 times a day book. It's at least 6 times a day book. I mean, ideally, it's a 600 times a day book. Ideally, it's like this. There's a capacity of the mind to look at the mind, to monitor the mind. Sorry, translators. It's called metacognitive awareness. Good luck with that. The capacity of mind to monitor the mind. And that's what the book is, a tool to train our mind to constantly be monitoring our actions of body, speech, and mind. The goal isn't 6 times a day. It's not like on my 6th book entry, I'm like, close my book. Got that done. Like, cross that off my to-do list. Finished monitoring my vows today. My mind can do anything now. Not like that. The book trains us to, you know, I'm teaching the Yoga Sutra right now. Yeah, fit for the mind. And the first line of the Yoga Sutra is Atta Yoga. Now, yoga. And I love that. It's like, there's always a time to be practicing yoga. Like, when should we practice yoga? Now, and now, and now. And so it doesn't matter what happened last week or last month or an hour ago. I got jealous, or I did this, or I did that. It's okay. Yoga is now. 6 times book is now. And that's awesome. So one of the ways that I like to focus on keeping so the 6 times book, it's a trick. It's a tool to train the mind. And the more tools we have to train the mind or to train the heart, the better. And that's so much of what Buddhism is. It's like, here's a billion practices to help us train the mind, train the heart. Find the ones that work. One of the ones that worked for me is called Penba Gito. Penba Gito. Nicole, could you take a stab at writing that in the chat? Penba Gito. Penba, Tope is power. Tope is power. Gi, G-Y-I, Gi means of. And Penba means to project. So it's the power of projection. And what that means is projecting, as in, like, when we take a bow and arrow and we pull the string back and we project the arrow, it's the same word. And so it's a practice to project our day forward in the right direction. What's the right direction? Getting away from thinking me, 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 me. Trying to start our day smashing our self-cherishing. Someone described that to me once. When you go to the amusement park and there's this game where there's like, it's called whack-a-mole. Sorry, translators. It's like you have a club and you whack something, like you hit it. And it's this game where this little animal pops up. And as soon as it pops up, you have to smash it. And that's how we should treat our self-cherishing. As soon as our self-cherishing pops up, we should and we just smash self-cherishing as soon as it arises. So we project our day to fight that tendency. to be hyper focused on me. And so the practice is simple. It is first thing before we get out of bed. Think of 3 things to do for others. Simple things. It's not going to be, I pulled somebody out of a burning building. Okay. If you get that opportunity, fantastic. You should absolutely do it. It's just not a very realistic plan. And it can't be things that we normally do. So if you have kids and you normally feed them breakfast, great. Continue to do that. It doesn't count. Okay. It's 3 extra things. You should feed your kid, but we're trying to train the mind in 3 extra things. And we don't get better at living ethically automatically. It's a process. It's a skill. It's a skill that we develop. It's a beautiful lifelong journey. So that practice, I would have to rank it as like definitely in my top 3 favorite practices of all time. It's simple. I enjoy it. And I just find it's helpful. So my encouragement is, how are we going to take a course on Buddhist ethics and make it practical? Well, wake up, think of 3 things to do for others. And I need to write them down, or I'll just forget them. And I don't have just one 6 times book. I've got a bunch. And I really try to have them in different places in the house. And same with just kind of a book that's good for my mind. Like if I often leave my 6 times book on top of my coffee machine, my coffee making stuff. So to get to my coffee, I need to go through my 6 times book to get to my coffee. Like if I want coffee, I have to physically move my book. And that greatly helps. And I can do, connect, enjoy doing my book as I make my coffee. So I write those 3 things down in my book. I'm amazed how hard that practice can be. How many times I'm lying in bed and I'm like, I can't think of 3 things. After months of doing the practice, I'm like, God, this is so frustrating. Why can't I think of 3 things to do for someone else? But we can do it. I made a new one this year. I bought a bunch of envelopes and stamps, and I'm now writing my mom letter, like super old school. And my mom and my grandma used to write each other every week, and then get these long letters from each other every week. And it was so beautiful. So, out of this practice, I don't know, some really sweet things can come. And for me, it's just a very tangible, practical trick or tool that makes my life better. And that's Vinaya. Kind of keeps me on track with who I want to be and how I live my life. Because I've noticed that it doesn't happen automatically. I don't feel like I naturally become a better person with age. I kind of find the opposite. I get grumpier. I think I have to fight it more. Rosie, back me up. Is that your experience or is it just me? I don't know if it's true for Rosie. It doesn't seem like it, but my experience is that it's a skill that we develop. And kindness doesn't just increase necessarily. Like a thing we can develop. Compassion is a thing we can develop. And Vinaya helps us develop those states of mind that we're looking to cultivate. That's the point. Oh my God. Let's start class. The text starts with an explanation of the title. Vinaya means to tame. We're taming the mind. Then there's a part of the text that it's a bowing down to the Buddha, and it's very traditional. A lot of texts will bow down to Manjushri, and Manjushri is the Buddha of wisdom, and so it's saying, hey, this is a book on wisdom. Or the text will start, I bow down to Chenrezig. Okay, cool. It's a text on compassion. Here we bow down to the Buddha because the Buddha represents Vinaya. And so it indicates the subject of the text. Why does the Buddha represent Vinaya? And it says because only a Buddha understands the subtle workings of karma. So it's a very famous topic called Len Dre. Say Len Dre. Len Dre. Lei is what? Does anyone know what lei means in Tibetan? Oh, we got a Tibetan scholar here. Can you do the pronunciation, Tin, also? What's lei mean?
Yeah, lei means karma.
Yeah, cool. Lei means karma. What's the dre?
It's the result.
Cool. Dre is the result. So obviously, that's a pretty important topic. It's pretty famous. Karma and results. And that's a part of the subject of Vinaya. And so it's the things we do, the actions, karma, and the results of those actions. And only a Buddha can understand the most subtle intricacies of that process. And that's why in the text we bow down to the Buddha as a source of the Vinaya. Very cool. And it's important because those connections are invisible, it's very hard to understand what to do and what not to do. And that leads us to a very famous part of the teaching. So let's look at the first slide. Okay, here's the 3 sections. We're talking about the second, the introduction. We're going to move on. Let's go to them. There's the 3. Let's talk about this slide. 3 levels of reality. So there's 3 ways we can know something. And those relate to 3 different, increasingly subtle aspects of reality. So the first way we can know something is with any of our senses. Okay, I can see a pen with my eyes. I can hear the sirens of New York with my ears. If I had remembered to bring my coffee over, I could taste my coffee with my tongue. So we can correctly perceive reality. We can correctly perceive reality directly through the senses. So it's a direct, correct perception through the senses. What is that? What are those things? It's anything that has a color and a shape. So just stop. Okay? But also most of our thoughts or thought, any thought we have, we perceive with the sense of the mind. Okay, so that's obvious reality. In Tibetan, it's Nungir. Nungir. Okay. So what's an example of obvious reality? The cup, the pen, my happy thoughts, my anxious thoughts. Level 2. Please say Kokgir. Kokgir. Kokgir is the reality that's hidden from us. It's how we perceive things that we can't directly perceive with a sense power. So it's things that we need to use logic for. Okay. What would be an example? Like if I have a pen, you can see it. And then if I took the pen and put it behind my back, is there still a pen there? Well, if you could logically determine that there still was a pen there, that would be just as good as seeing it directly. Okay. So just because we can't see the pen, we know pens don't just disappear. If you didn't see me throw it, or if you didn't hear it drop. It'd be easier if you're in the room. We could logically determine that there's still a pen in my hand. So we can use logic for things that we can't see. The classical example is emptiness. We need to use our logic to understand that things aren't self-existent. The last section is Shinto-kokyu. Please say Shinto-kokyu. Shinto-kokyu. Extremely deep reality. This is things we can't use logic for. What's an example? Well, like, why do I have a mole right here on my cheek? There it is. Why do I have a mole on my cheek? Like, why did I have to go bald and not my brother? Like, why is the sky blue? Why is grass green? Not like what chemicals make it appear that way, or not because of a wavelength of color, but what action did I do in the past that planted a seed to have a sky that is blue? And we can't figure that out with logic. And so we need to have faith in authority. We need to have trust or faith in a text or in a spiritual teacher. And that's extremely interesting to me. Like, you just have to take it on faith. Like, karma is such a core, essential component of Buddhism. And the Buddha said, you'll never figure it out. You'll never figure it out logically. You'll never see it directly until you're me, until you're like me. You'll never figure it out. And so we have to take that whole thing on faith. And we're supposed to live our whole life, what, because somebody wrote it in a book? And so I think we really need to, I think everybody at some point, I hope everyone struggles with that. And I suggest you struggle at it by first looking at emptiness, because that we can figure out. I can prove empty. No problem. I'm pretty confident in my capacity to understand that things are empty. And then from that paradigm, to look at what our options are. And then to see, maybe that's our entry into understanding this idea of seeds that are Shinto-kokyu. Where was I? I got distracted by noticing someone's haircut. Okay. So the classical example of something that's Shinto-kokyu is karma and its results. We need to go to the trusted authority on that. And what's really interesting is there's a whole bunch of different schools of philosophy that don't accept that. not everybody accepts that as a valid means of knowledge. Okay, some schools only accept the first two. Some schools accept six. I'm talking about some of the Hindu schools, for instance. In Buddhism, there's a logical proof to prove that the Buddha is somebody who we can trust and take as a valid source of authority. Okay, so that's another way to have some faith in this idea of karma, is to study. It's in ACI 4. Logically proving that the Buddha is someone we should have faith in. So we use logic, the second category, to prove the third. Let's go to the next slide really quick. So there's another way to present it. There's deductive, what did I call it? Direct perception and deductive reasoning. And that deductive reasoning is used to prove both Kokir and Shinto Kokir. It's a bit of a long story. We'll save it for another day. Let's go to the previous slide. I'm going to get too sidetracked. Okay. So what level of reality is the pen? Someone can shout it out or type it in. At what level of reality is the pen? Someone said one. Obvious reality. Someone said it's logic. To perceive the pen, we need logic. Someone else said we got a bunch of twos. Daria, you look like you're not convinced by the number 2 answer. Benji says 1. Kokir. Is the pen an example of obvious reality? Can I look at it and see it with my eyes? Can I have a correct, direct perception of it through my eyes? Yeah. So it's an example of obvious reality. What about for a, yeah, Nicole's kind of get ahead of me here. What about for a blind person? Now is it an obvious reality? Well, maybe because they can feel it. I don't know. Yeah, Anastasia, I agree. Maybe. What about what level of reality is emptiness? The classical example of hidden reality. Is emptiness hidden reality? Yeah, Megan said depends. You got to ask for who. What about for someone in the direct perception of emptiness? They are directly perceiving emptiness. It's the first category. Direct, correct perception. It's a special form of that. For them, it's obvious reality. So we have to ask for who. All right. What's the point of all that? We're bowing down to the Buddha as a representative of Vinaya. Why? Because the subject of Vinaya is Lendre. karma and its consequences. Why do we need to bow down to the Buddha for karma and its consequences? Because apparently we need to be at that level to be able to understand the subtle workings of cause and result. So that's the flow so far. Okay. Let's look at the next slide. And the next one. And that's saying it's on your homework. Tipping you off. Okay. Let's do the next one. Okay, cool. So at this point, I'd like to thank Sarah for making my slides. You should all thank Sarah for putting the little question one, giving you a big hint that it's the first question on your homework, alerting you to the fact that this information will be useful for those doing homework. Three main sections of Chone Lama's explanation. Okay. What's Chone Lama explaining? He's explaining the Vinaya Sutra. Who wrote the Vinaya Sutra? Ultra Dhamma. What was the Vinaya Sutra explaining? It was explaining the Buddha's teachings on the basket of Vinaya. Okay. So I had to go back and try to remember all this. But let's kind of catch the flow. The Buddha taught three higher trainings: morality, concentration, wisdom. When he taught morality, he taught it in the topic of Vinaya. And we looked at two main sutras that he wrote, or that were written. That gets commented on in the Vinaya Sutras by Dharmabhadra, and that gets commented on by Chone Lama. So Chone Lama's text has these three divisions. How do you go from not having vows to having vows? That sounds important. Once you got your vows, how do you keep from trashing them? How do you not trash your vows? Also seems pretty important. Third section, when we trash our vows, how do we fix them? When, not if. Let's take a look at the first. How do we get vows? The first step in getting vows is understanding why we would want them. Okay. That's the important first step. And I didn't, yeah, Stevie says renunciation. That would be great too. I didn't have that first step. When I took my first set of vows, refuge vows, I had absolutely no idea what they were. No clue. I had no idea why someone should take them. I did it because someone was like, you should do this. Like, come on, let's go. And I was like, okay. Sounds cool. Let's do it. And I'm super glad I did it. You know, it turned out pretty awesome, but I don't think it's necessarily the most powerful way. I think ideally we have more understanding than I had. I had a great experience. I'm forever grateful for it. Um, but I would recommend understanding the vows better than I did before taking them. Partly because I hadn't, when I did start to learn them, they felt a little, it's like, oh, a little restrictive. Like I had a little bit of doubt with some of it when I actually learned what I had committed myself to. And I think if we see the vows as something that allows us to fly, as like where I came to after learning them was they're the most precious things that I have. My vows are the most precious thing I own. They're the they're the thing that makes me happy. And I have 253 of the most awesome, amazing friends that I get to have in my heart. And I get to be like, this one's so cool. And this one is also amazing. And if I follow this one, I'm going to get an awesome result. That's amazing. And when I learned them, it became like more excited about having a thorough understanding of them. And it was like 253 best friends that kind of keep me in line and help me get to where I want to go. So how do we get them? Um, there's a whole process of, there's like a ceremonial process, lots of rules, lots of traditions. Um, for the ordination vows, there's has to be this many monks, this many nuns. There's specific qualifications of the vow master. Who does what. And to make a monk or a nun, those ceremonies are much more complex. I've seen it 3 or 4 times, but we didn't study it. But there's one person that has to. They sit there with like a stopwatch, and as soon as the vows are given, they like immediately record the time because that becomes your established rank. Friday, August 2nd, 10:54. You got your monk's vows. And anyone after you is a lower rank. And to be honest, the lowest ranking monk is higher than the highest ranking nun. And so there's parts of the archaic Buddhist system that we should acknowledge and we should reject. Like that cultural aspect of 2,500 years ago seems problematic. And at Diamond Mountain, we didn't follow that. Like literally in the monastery, you're lined up in order of rank. And we didn't accept that idea. There's another funny part of the ceremony for a monk and nun vow. So if someone's becoming a monk, they have to go out with a senior monk, and they go out, we're in the temple doing the ceremony, and the two of them have to leave, and they go in the bathroom, and they have to do a gender check just to make sure that the person is in fact a boy, or they are in fact a girl. It's always like this extremely awkward moment, and these two people walk out and do the thing, and then they have to walk back in, and they're generally embarrassed, and it's kind of funny. But there's lots of ceremony for that. The non-monk and non-ceremonies are a lot more simple. So part of how do we go from having them to not having them is understanding the ceremony. Part number two is, how do we keep the vows? Let's do the next slide. So this is for the second part. How do we keep the vows? 4 aspects. We need outer support. This can be the person that gives you the vow, or in the monastery, it was someone called a Nay Lama. So not necessarily your main teacher, but like the person that helps you understand how to live in the monastery and how to keep your vows. So we don't really have this system so much. It's the person that helps you navigate your spiritual world. And we integrated this system at Diamond Mountain. Anyone new was forced to have a Nay Lama. They were forced to choose a mentor, so that they had someone that they could trust and that they could go to with a question. And you can fire your Nay Lama at any time. It's fine. You don't need to keep them forever. But it was important to have. And it's like a friend or a mentor that guides us. And, so for us, I think this is having those types of relationships with people that can mentor us in our spiritual life, or to be part of a community where there's enough trust that serves as a foundation where we can call each other out on our bullshit. Right? Like, it looks like you're saying one thing and doing another thing. What's going on? In a way that's supportive, not vindictive. Or someone that when we're on the verge of breaking a vow, we can go to them. Like in AA, like having a Vinaya sponsor. And then, so this outer support, there's 2 emotions that protect our vows. I don't want to do that thing because I'll feel bad about it. I'm just going to regret. I'd love to punch them in the face, but I'm just going to regret it. It's not who I want to be. But also, it's the outer support. It's like, I don't want to punch them in the face because the person that gave me my vows, how would they feel? Like it'd be embarrassing. So it's cultivating relationships that, I Geshe Michael found out that I cheated on my income taxes after 30 years of telling me not to. I'd be kind of embarrassed. I'm not going to do it because I don't want to have that on my conscience. Something like that. We should have that feeling of, I would feel bad about it in relation to myself and the other people in my life. And so to cultivate those relationships is really important. And that's the outer support. Second one, inner support. This is tapping into the inner motivation that we had when we took the vows. So how do we protect our vows? It's tapping into that moment when we're in the room surrounded by our friends and having cultivated the best motivation we could, right before that moment when someone gives us the vow. It's, can we hold on to that motivation? Like I remember taking my vows, and I remember trying really hard. Like it was, I don't know, I was trying hard at that point to do what my teacher had asked, and um, making the ceremony as special as I could. My teacher had asked me to do three things, and gave me 6 months to do them, and I did them. I'll do a retreat, retake this course. And and I came back and asked him for the vows again, and he was like, yeah, okay. And then it just didn't happen, and it didn't happen, and it didn't happen, and I kind of gave up on it. And he's like, the last day of our retreat is like, do you want them? And I still want them. I was like, yeah. And he's like, let's do it tomorrow. And I just kind of was like freaked out, like, trying to get my mind ready. And so I, cleaned up the whole space. I told this story to people a lot. But I was cleaning up the space. It was in the desert of Arizona. I was new to the desert, and there's fucking scorpions all over the place. And I had like, I'm Canadian. We don't do scorpions. I don't know if they jump at you. I don't know how to get rid of a scorpion. Like, I don't know how fast they run. So I'm like trying to clear the scorpions out of the space and clean it up. And you know, by the end of my time at the desert, I knew you could go up behind them and just kind of grab them and get rid of them. But um, I made it as nice as I could. You know, I really spent the time cleaning it up, and I went home and I got my favorite hockey jersey on. I wanted to take my vows in my favorite hockey jersey, and I studied the course again, and I stayed up all night trying to do it. And I remember waking up and my like literally my face was in my textbook. Like, my lip stuck to the pages of the book because I fell asleep. You know, I wasn't able to do it, but I tried. And I remember the ceremony was beautiful, and I didn't know, but there was a lot, you know, like 15, 20 people came, and so the ceremony happens, and there's 3 rounds of the ceremony, and um, I remember at the beginning of the 3rd round, the person looked at me and was like, do you want your vows?" Like, he looked right at me and he's like, do you really want your vows? And that moment was like, it seemed like an eternity. Like from when he said that to when he snapped his fingers, felt like an eternity. And in my mind, I was like, give me my fucking vows now. I need them. They are the most important. If I die now without having my vows, it'd be such a shame, you know? Because I understood them at that point, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do in my life. And you know, I don't know. So when he snapped his fingers, it was like this immediate relief of like, oh, I got him, got my vows. And I felt like this, like Geshe Michael the other day was talking about bodhicitta as this wall of prana leaving your body, going to all beings. This force that's like love, and it was the opposite. It was that, how he describes it, it's kind of freaks me out because it was exactly the experience for me of this tangible, invisible energy coming into my heart. And I don't really feel prana in my body. I don't really have those kinds of experiences ever. But it was like this total certainty that I'd gotten my vows. And that what was wild was knowing that that energy had been passed on 2,500 years from teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher. And that person giving me the vows wasn't Geshe Michael. It was someone else, you know, someone else that had, as purely as they could, made the commitment. And there's a lot of times, you know, I fail or I do things half-assed. I feel like, you know, that was one time I got it right. Um, and the motivation in that moment was really strong. It was really pure. And that is an important part of making the vow form in our mind. And when we can tap back into that moment of that emotion of like how much I cherish the vows, that's the inner support. Best as I understand it and can explain it. Like that's what it that's what the inner support is. And it's something that it's a support. We can rely on it. We can go back to it. Because it's not always like that. You know? The third part is the explanation of the vows. So the details. It's hard to protect your vows if you don't know them. So it's like, what exactly can I do before I break the vow? How close can I get to this and not break it? Like, can I stretch it a little bit? Like, which ones are black and white? Which ones have a little bit of a gray area? Um, that's all important in protecting our vows. Mm, like which ones are modified in certain situations? Like, can I kind of lie? I'd like lie a little bit on taxes. You know, like, can I talk about business for 30 seconds at lunch and then claim it as a business expense? You know, everyone else does. It kind of looks like that's okay in the tax code. You know, is that okay? Can I do that? You know, if somebody asks me a question and my honest answer will hurt them, can I give them a dishonest answer to protect their mind? So the study of vows is understanding all of those gray areas. It's a funny topic. Uh, somebody asked the Dalai Lama, like, if there was a person with their finger on the button that would start a nuclear war, and you had a gun, you know, would you shoot them? And the Dalai Lama is like, I don't know. I have no idea. Like, like when that happens and I decide, like, then I'll let you know. So as much as it's an important topic, mostly I think it's highly philosophical. Right? Generally, I think, you know, we get into these imaginary, extreme examples of, well, if you were in this scenario, what would be the right thing to do? But generally, I think we know the right thing to do. We just don't want to admit it. But that's a part of of protecting the vows is to understand every aspect of them. Third is to master the practices. So there's three. One is sojung, and that's a ritual to restore broken vows. And it's a big part of that is also to restore unity in the community. I think we think of sojung as I broke my vow, I go to sojung, I fix that thing that I broke. and that's part of it. But it should also be about um, restoring problems or hard feelings in the community. So the fourth category, mastering the practices, 3 parts. One is sojam. The second one is called yarne. Tim, can you put that in the chat? It's called yarne. Yarne. It's a 3-month summer retreat. And so this is a tradition where the monasteries would go into a deep retreat and study extremely hard for 3 months. The last is called Galye. Yarne, Yarne, and then Galye. Yarne, Galye. Yeah, I'll put it in, no problem. I don't know exactly what they mean, but Yarne is a 3-month retreat. Galye is, it's what happens after that summer retreat. And they have a 3-week party, 3-week celebration. And that's it's like you work your ass off for 3 months, and then you need to decompress and relax. Last thing today, the next section in the Vinaya is called everything else, or it's called like other stuff. And it's things like, how do you build a monastery? What should you make the walls out of? What should you make the foundation of? How far away from other people should it be? And the coolest part of that, and the thing that Geshe Michael focused on, was the very last thing is, what do you put in the foyer? Like, what do you put in the entrance? And it's required that you put in a picture of the wheel of life. So it's like, okay, you built your entire building, great. Put up this picture. And that's cool because I just studied it. And we're at a special site in Indonesia. So I'll tell the story. Frank, the PPT, it's going to be a little funny. It's got builds. We'll just figure it out. Karina, if you have some images to throw in the chat of the site, that might be fun. But I think it's a fun story, so we'll finish with a story. Frank, we still need the PPT though.
Yeah, give me 1 second and make it a PDF.
You're running.
Yeah. Give me 1 sec. I will open a key.
Okay. So the Wheel of Life is one of the most important images in Buddhism, for sure. One of the most important images in the world. It's an image that shows us, it's an explanation of why we suffer and how to get out of that state of suffering. Benji, if you've got Borobudur pictures and you want to throw them in the chat, also please do. Oh, We lost it. So the image is a explanation of perfect explanation of how we suffer, why we suffer. And these are the instructions for it in English, twice. So you can grab those from the PPT later. These are the parts of the wheel of life. Let's go to the next image. So our story starts in India a long, long time ago. And 2,500 years ago. And at that time, there was a bunch of kingdoms in India ruled by different kings and queens. And we'll focus on one area called Raja Graha. If you could advance it once, Karina. Yes, where there lived a king called Bimbisara. And in another area called Vasta, there lived a king called Udrayana. If you go back one. Oh, yeah, it's going to be tricky. Leave it there. That coin is from the kingdom of Udrayana. It's 2,500 years old, I think. Okay, so there's two kings. And they're very, very famous in the history of India and Buddhism. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to finish this in 8 minutes. We're going to run over 5 minutes or so. Next slide. Okay, so one day there's some merchants that go from Bimbisara's kingdom to Udrayana's kingdom. And they're just selling stuff. They're merchants. Before they sell their stuff, they go to the king. And they make an offering. And Udrayana says, well, who's your king? And in your kingdom, what's the most precious thing? What's the most rare thing? And they say, well, our king is Bimbisara. And what's most rare in our kingdom is precious jewels. And so Udrayana, the king, gives them a whole chest of precious jewels to take back to their king, Bimbisara. And if you look at the next slide, this is a carving of this scene at the site we were just at in Indonesia, telling the story of the creation of the Wheel of Life. Next slide. The merchants bring back this treasure chest of jewels. And Bimbisara is like, cool. You know, that's amazing. What a nice guy. And I need to return the gift. I need to give him something nicer. And so they ask, well, what's rare in Udrayana's kingdom? And they say, oh, well, you know, really nice silk and really nice clothing is quite rare. So he fills up the chest and they send it back to the other king, and the two kings become good friends. You can go to the next slide. And but there becomes a problem between the two kings. They just start giving each other presents. And each time they try to outdo each other a little bit. something a little bit nicer, something a little bit nicer. And I guess it gets a little carried away. And at one point, Udrayana sends Bimbisara this kind of magical robe where every single jewel is said to radiate golden light, each one of them beyond value. And the cloak is magical. It protects against fire and poison. And there's simply nothing better in the kingdom. And so if we go to the next slide, you can see, I think this is an image. We'll pretend it's an image of, Bimbisara and his ministers. They're talking and they're like, we got to figure something out. Like, go and find something more valuable than this robe so we can give it back to Udrayana. And they come back to the king, and the king's like, what do we got? And they're like, nothing. We got nothing. There's nothing more cool in our kingdom. And so they're kind of stuck, and they're like, what do we do? And one of them says, well, I know the Buddha is staying close by. Let's go ask for advice. And so the king's like, okay. So they go to the Buddha, and they're like, what do we have in our kingdom that's better than this jeweled robe? That can match the value. And the Buddha's like, there's nothing. You don't have anything more valuable except a picture of me. The Buddha's like, you got nothing as valuable except a picture of me. And he's like, you should give him a picture of me. And the king's like, okay. And so they commission all of these artists to come in and make a picture of the Buddha to send as a gift to Udrayana. And so the king hires these people to do that, and the weeks go by, and the picture's not finished. And so the king's kind of pissed, and he comes and checks in. What's the problem? And all the artists are just looking at the Buddha, and they're just like so memorized by how beautiful he is that they can't draw his image. And they're just sitting there in amazement that the Buddha is so cool. It's too stunned. And the Buddha's like, this is not working. Like, we got to figure something out. And so he's like, look, put up a sheet and then a light source that casts a shadow of my image. And then just have them draw the outline. And so they draw the outline of the Buddha. And he's like, okay, cool. Now he's like, now I want you to fill in the rest of the painting. And he says, draw a circle, divide it into 5 different parts. And he describes the wheel of life. Put it all in the hands of the Lord of Death. And he makes a prediction that when the king sees it, he'll immediately have great faith and he'll see something special. And so they finish the painting and they wrap it in silk. And they put it in a big chest of gold. And Let's go to the, I think there's an image, the next slide. And they take it to Udrayana. And he comes out with, all of this, they meet in a big field. And he comes out with all of his army and these chariots and this big show of respect. And the people from Bimbisara's kingdom, they take the painting out and they unroll, they roll it out into this big field for the king to see. And the king Udrayana prostrates to it. And with this great respect, he looks at the image and he just instantly understands all the components of the wheel of life. And in that moment, he sees emptiness directly. And he has, and and Udrayana, it's this very famous king in the history of Buddhism, and he kind of gives up being king, and he starts inviting all of the monks that are studying with the Buddha to start teaching in his kingdom. And Buddhism really spreads through King Udrayana, through this event and through this image of the wheel of life. And it becomes so important that as part of building the monastery, it's like, you got to put this image in the front. So when you walk in, you have to pass this image. Let's go to the next slide. And that's the image from the temple site. That's the king hearing the teachings. One more. Let's end. I'm hoping we have an image of the actual painting, and that's the image there. So we'll look at some of the aspects of the next class. We ran out of time. If we could, under this image perfectly explains how we create all of our problems and how to get out of it. It explains the three poisons, like the three attitudes that cause all of our negative thoughts and negative emotions. It shows all of the different types of existence. There's 12 links of dependent origination, how we get into problems, how we get out of problems. It's all held in impermanence in the form of death. The monster of impermanence. And that's all a samsara. Everything in the grasp of the monster is samsara. And then there's a Buddha outside of that, outside of samsara, pointing at the moon. And the moon is nirvana. And at the bottom are a few lines that explain how we make it to the moon, how we get to the moon. So we'll add that to next class. So my goal is to allow time for Q&A or some discussion. So it's not just me talking at everybody for an hour and a half. Today there was just more content. So, hopefully we can have an experience in this course where it's not just me talking at you all the time, but today I wanted to get through that much content. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Let's remember the beginning of class and make this a practical exploration in our own ethical life. And hopefully we can share that with each other as we go on this 5-week journey. Okay, cool. Thanks for translating. And I look forward to our next class, which is on Tuesday,
August 6th, right? Tuesday.
August 6th. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Благодарю.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Beautiful class. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Teacher.
Thank you. Thank you. Stay with us. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. See you all soon.